Hello and welcome to another session of our live webinar. Yes, you're welcome. I hope that you have been impacted with knowledge up to this point. This is the last week of the webinar. We are rounding up with our sessions. This is today is going to be the first live lesson that we are having to round off this final week of the webinar sessions. I'd like to hear from you in the comments. First, tell me where you're coming from, which platform are you streaming this from, and what has been your aha moment since we began this journey. Apologies for the lighting, and I had to use a different venue today to avoid some technical issues that we were having at our usual spot. But I hope that you can see and hear me clearly. And this session, we are going to be receiving one of our guest speakers who is going to handle the topic of the health component for enhancing learning. So far, we have seen that you, the parent, are the most important piece. You are that secret ingredient. I'd like to know what has been your aha moment. What is it that you've learned so far that really struck you, that has changed your perspective, that has given you maybe a clearer insight, has helped you to be more pumped for the year ahead? I am pumped for every academic year. I'm pumped. I always start the academic year with a fresh perspective, trying to re-strategize, because every year as our kids move higher on the academic ladder, we need to come to the table with fresh strategies to accompany them profitably. All right. So it's all about you being that architect of your child's learning environment. You are the architect environment. We saw the different components of the learning environment, and we saw that the most important of part of the learning environment is the one that you actually have control over, which is your home. Your home is the most important part of your child's overall learning environment, followed by the school. That's why choosing the right school is also a very important decision that you have to make, because by choosing the school, you have chosen the teacher, you have chosen the classroom, you have chosen the learning conditions that come with all of these things. And if you choose a school that does not make room for your involvement, then you are setting yourself up for a year of struggle. Great. So we're going to receive guest speaker will be here any moment from now. And as soon as she's here, we're going to put her on. Due to some technical difficulties we've had up to this point, we will not be able to stream the two-part series. It was supposed to be a two-part session tonight, with myself going first to take the creating the learning environment at home, how to nurture the love for learning from the home front before we receive our guest speaker. But due to some technical issues, that has not been possible. We are going to have our guest speaker come on and give us her insightful talk on the health component for enhancing learning. If you were with us here last year, I'm sure you remember we had a session with her and it was amazing. So if you're here and you've not had this session before, trust me, you are in for a journey, a thrilling journey. You're in for a thrilling knowledge journey with her tonight. I'm going to try to get her on board. I think she's trying to join us. We're going to receive her in a few minutes. Meanwhile, let me hear from you in the comments. What has been your high point so far on this journey? What has been your high point so far on this journey? Remember that the comment section should be buzzing while we are learning. Share your highlights, share feedback, ask questions to keep the session interactive. The more interactive the session is, the more you get out of it. So don't just sit passively in the class. Be an active learner. Participate. Share your ideas. Share your highlights. Put your feedback in the comments so that we know that you are following as we go. So I asked the question on the session, I think a couple of at the end of the last week, about how have you had some time to reflect on how you might be able to partner with your child's school this year. Tomorrow we're going to have our third guest speaker come on who will be teaching us on how to collaborate with the class teacher. I personally look forward to that particular session, and I'm hoping that you too are eager to learn exactly um, what it is that he's going to share with us on the topic. I'm trying to get our guest speaker to come on board. So who do we have here with us? Let me see you in the comment section. Please let someone else know on the forum that we are live. Let someone else know on the forum that we are live. If you're here from the DR tribe, please kindly head back to the forum, get into your accountability forum as well, and let your fellow tribe members know that we are live. If you're here from the Back to School webinar WhatsApp platform, please go back there. Let someone else know to join us. Let's try to get as many parents in here as possible. Let's try to get as many of us in here as possible to participate in this session today. It's a very important session, and I see we have just a few of us here. Please get back on the forum. Let someone else know that we are live so that they can join in. More the merrier, right? Great. I think our guest is already here. Amazing. All right. So while we are trying to get the slides on board, I'm going to introduce her and bring her on board. Great. So you are welcome. So we are glad to receive, we have here with us Dr. Judwin Zoe. She's going to be our guest speaker for tonight. She is a UK-based pediatrician and an expert nutritionist. Yes, she's been very keen. She has a special interest in nutrition right from back in the day at school. So yes, she is very insightful, very passionate pediatrician, and she is great at what she does. Last year, she wowed us with her presentation that helped empower us on how to pay attention to the health component of our children's learning. And I'm sure this year we are taking it even further. You're welcome, Dr. Judwin. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm very audible.
Yes, we can hear you very well. I'm trying to get your slides on board so that we can proceed with the session. Meanwhile, please just introduce yourself. Just warm up a little bit to the parents as they are also streaming in, trying to come on board. Yes, it is interactive. There'll be questions, any questions that are being asked during your session, I'm going to put them up on the screen for you to answer. Please go
Okay.
ahead and let us know some more.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jenny. I just realized that I could turn some lights. Yeah. Okay. I'm really glad to be with you guys. Apologies for being a little bit late. I cycled to work and today I had to pick up a new bicycle. So or swap my bicycle. So it took me a bit longer than usual. Um while Dr. Jenny is trying to upload the slides. So as she said, yes, I'm Judwin. I Jennifer was my classmate from boarding school. Well, she was my classmate in boarding school, but we went to the same boarding school. She was my classmate in university, and a longtime good friend of mine. And I'm very pleased and proud of the work that she does with children and moms. For anybody who deals with children, especially in a healthcare setting like mine in the UK, where a lot of the problems are not related to being able to money or funding healthcare or certain um, basic issues. Food is not a problem, so you'd see that there's a lot of problems around parenting and how children are raised, and you really see the need for people to have these parenting courses. So it's really impressive what Dr. Jen is doing. And in addition to what she said, so I'm a nutritionist so I do have a degree in nutrition. It's always been my passion. In addition to that, I also work in pediatric gastroenterology and liver. So it's a specialty that deals with through diseases of the gut, the liver, and any nutritional disorders in children. So that's really what I do. Um, if you don't mind letting me know, how would I know when the slides are set up, Jenny? And in the meantime, may I just ask everyone who has a question to ask, you can feel free to ask any question that you want. Please pop it into the chat and I will ask them. Just start asking from, it's good. I'll try to make it interactive. So if you can ask as we go along, that will be helpful. So Jennifer, please don't hesitate to, if I'm saying something that's relevant, please do interrupt me and ask the question. So don't hesitate to do that. Excuse me. Okay.
I'll be in the
So
background, guiding you along.
okay, so would you be able to move the slides, or would I have to move them?
I will move the slides. Just give me a cue when you want
Okay,
the slides moved and I'll do that.
okay, fine. So I had to think about. So I was asked to talk about your top tips to ensure a healthy start to school for your child. About, yes, there are a lot of things that my lovely Cameroonian moms and dads know, because I'm assuming that it's not just moms who are parents, there's dads too, and dads uh, should be actively involved in looking after the children. So I had to think, oh, there's so much that you guys know. What can I talk about? This talk is not going to take 45 minutes, so just be patient. Right. So the first part of my talk really, so I know that you have children of varying ages. And if you don't have your own children, you have nieces, nephews, cousins who may be under your care, because a parent is not just whoever's giving birth to a child. So I thought early years and early development of a child, because I'll start from that and then move on to, just things throughout that you can do to help your child throughout the ages. So it's really important to know that a child's brain, by 2 years old, a child has reached 80% of the adult size. So that means that in the first 5 years of life, the child has achieved almost the same head circumference and head consistency as an adult. And it's really impressive because those first 5 years of a child's life are what you need, are crucial years, are years that, if you put in so much into that child, you realize that you're setting up the child for good, like you're really giving them a good start to life, and you really reap the fruits later on. It's rather unfortunate that those are also difficult years physically, because you have to breastfeed, you have to look after their physical needs. At the same time, you're perhaps a young mom trying to handle work. So, I'm not saying that it's easy, and it's not as easy as it sounds, but if you can maximize these 5 years of life. And it's not about teaching ABCs or how to read and write. No, yes, you can create a genius, but it's about, identifying those potentials, maximizing them, exposing the children to as many things as possible. Next slide, please. Um, and so I'll look at it. Apologies for the cropped picture, but it's so hard to find pictures of black babies on the internet, and I had to crop this black baby on it to kind of represent the cohort that we're talking about. So for this age group, I'd like to think about it as the three C's. So the things that will help these babies to grow into very healthy children, and preparing them for school, because these are the ages when, like I said, the brain is developing a lot. They start to go to school. They're about to go to school. They're about to interact with other children. So yes, there's a genetic component. So there's how a child is born. Those are things that you cannot change. But there are loads and loads of other factors that you could change. I'm going to talk about some of them a bit later. But at this age, nutrition is very crucial. And these are things that some of them you may have done. Some of them may be too late. By the time you're 3 years, the child is 3 years old and about to go to school. What's the average age at which people tend to start school in Cameroon? Babies, children. What about the average age?
3 years.
3 years. Okay. Yeah, 3 years. Is that proper school or nursery?
That's pre-nursery.
Pre-nursery.
School primary one would be usually around five,
Okay.
six years old.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. So there are certain things if you're still a young mother, and that's why parenting, you need to start attending parenting courses and things even before your baby is born. So there are certain things that you do that impact the child. By the time you're getting towards school age and you're thinking, okay, what can I do? It's probably a little bit too late. But it's never too late to catch up. So thinking about the feeding, breastfeeding, again, I'll explain that in more detail a bit later on. Their physical and mental health, well-being. Like I said, exposing them to educational opportunities. Just yesterday, I think it was, I saw a child. I was consulting a child who is being labeled as autism, and maybe the child has autism, but again, this child is not exposed to any form of stimulation at all. They basically put the child in front of TV, and the child is watching TV while the mom goes about her activities. So thinking about education and learning opportunities, putting a child in front of the screen is just not the way that a child would learn. You have to expose children to that interactive those interactive opportunities, building bricks, reading to them, singing songs, playing with them, bringing them to the kitchen, doing things with them right from a young age. And again, thinking about play. So play is good. There's lots of evidence to say that playing and interacting with children, exposing them to all those things has a significant role in their small and developing brain. So those are things that you want to even start doing, from a preschool era. And thinking about the sleep as well. Sleep is not that hard for this age because when they're about to sleep, they sleep, in the younger children. But for older children, again, it's a bit more complicated. Again, I'll talk about that in a bit more detail. And there's some other things that, you would struggle with, like financial provision, the kind of environment in which the child is growing, cultural exposure, do they have siblings, do they have family, all those things are really important. Next slide, please. Um, So yeah, so just in slightly more detail, again, I'm still talking about this age, this under five age. If you have children under five, because that's a really, really important age. So ensuring that so ensuring that they have secure connections, and this basically means ensuring that children feel nurtured from a very young age. As they're growing up to be to be exposed to the world, because school the first time they go to school is the first time that many of these children are going out of their comfort zone, being exposed to the world, and the way they will react to the world, it really is determined by how well they've been parented, if that makes sense. So thinking about all those aspects I mentioned to create help your child bond, ensure, help them to be confident, help them to build their critical skills, their motor fine skills at a very early age. Next slide, please. And again, I think it's communication. So yes, again, communication. So like I said, if you put a child in front of the screen all day and you go about your activities, no surprise that child is going to develop signs of autism, will be labeled as autism. I'm not saying that they may not have autism, but a child who has a predisposition to autism, again, who is in an environment that that enables the autistic traits, is just going to just have a decline. So it's something to think about, you know. So talking to your babies, they would think that they don't listen, but talking to them, building their thoughts, reading aloud to them, and that listening to their little baby talks. Again, all of that prepares them for how they go to school, how they interact with other children. Next slide, please. And again, thinking about the body and the mind. So I'm not going to talk about this in too much detail because I'll talk about it in the next slide. Next slide. Okay. So this is where I was going to ask if anybody knew how much food we should have. So why is food important for children? So you can have there are two types of malnutrition. You can have undernutrition and overnutrition. Now, having the right nutritional balance is nowadays is tricky. In the back in the day, it wasn't too hard because we didn't have screens. Children would literally have to go and play. We didn't have all these processed foods. But now, with so much screen time, all the foods, there's snacks ready available. children are just snacking and snacking, watching too much screen, and then you have obesity. But then you also have situations where you have children who are not being able to feed properly for whatever reason. And sometimes it could be because the child is actually poorly, in which case you need to seek help. So thinking about the child's calorie requirement, I think during holidays, most children gain weight for all the reasons I've mentioned above. But it's important to really have a balance with their calorie requirements. So the little babies have the most calorie requirements, and you would know because as a mom, if you're breastfeeding, they're probably eating around the clock. Again, overfeed. Be careful to not overfeed, especially for babies who are formula fed. But as they grow older, you want to make sure um, that you're giving them just adequate calories, and in terms of the calories you're giving them a varied diet. So issues such as constipation, again, that's not a big problem in Cameroon, but here it's a very massive problem. So giving them a varied diet full of grains, full of pulses like beans, grains, things like soybean, but that's still a pulse, corn, peanuts, um and even the caloric foods, fufu. So you see, as depending on also on the children's activity. So if your teenager is one who does a lot of sports, for example at school, you want to give them a bit more high calorie food, and even maybe some snacks. You can make some snacks at home that would help them, because if you send your child to school and they're hungry, then they would obviously struggle to focus in school. But at the same time, um sending them to school with too much food, you don't want them to sleep in class. So my advice to parents is usually give them a good breakfast, which I know is not always possible. But you can get something that can be eaten very easily and very quickly, but give a light snack for school, for that reason, because you want to have that balance, as you know, at school. Not too much, not too little, just the right balance. um and I know that, but sometimes I see parents. I don't know if it's overboard. I suppose people do what it works for them, but sometimes it can really be overboard. Are you still on, Jennifer? Next slide, please. So I think, so talking about physical activity by age. So again, I've mentioned um less screen time, more physical activity. So again, during holidays, it's probably, I'm not sure if it's harder or easier to do it. Like, I don't know what the thing is. Here there's been a lot of talk about screen time, and I feel like it's getting to be the case in Cameroon. Yes, it's nice to have all the video games and all of that, but you need to be strict with your children. And as school is approaching, especially, you need to already start getting those routines. I think school is starting in like less than 3 weeks. So you already need to start getting those routines in. Holiday is not a period for them to like just dive into screen times and all of that. Get them to do stuff. So again, physical activity, the recommended level of physical activity differs by age, and you can see that for the very younger children, the preschoolers, the toddlers, it's recommended they should really do a lot of activities. So you really want your child to be engaged in lots of outdoor activities. And you have to be proactive about it. So if you live like in a flat or a block of flats, you have to take them out to do stuff, because it will be very impractical to do things in your flats. So again, the physical activity is really really important for the older, the teenagers as well. And what we recommend is both, cardio activity and as well as strength activity. But if you let the teenagers go out there and do stuff, you wouldn't need to signpost them to what type of activity. They will do activities that will be a combination of both. um yeah, several times. And next slide, I think the next slide is literally about tips to encourage physical activity. So first, it starts by you. So I say you because your children would literally model what they see. So there's no way that daddy has a very big tummy, is very obese, or mommy is, and then you're expecting the children to be different. No, the children will be like the father, like the parents. So be a role model to your children. And maybe when school starts, there are always periods in life when we reflect on, okay, what can I do to change things? For some people, it's the new year. For some people, it's their birthdays. For some people, it's okay, this is the new school year. This is what we're going to start doing as a family. So encourage physical activity for the whole family. It's family therapy. And also encourage outdoor play. I remember when I was a child, my mom used to come and play dodging with us, and we really loved it. It also encourages bonding. She used to play dodging and sizzle with us. So not only does it, encourage the children to play, but mom is also joining them to play. So we've spoken about free screen times, and then finding lots of activities to do, and then having a family routine. I'll talk about that a bit more detail. Next slide, please. So again, one very, very important aspect is the mental health of children. I know that as Africans, we often feel that, oh, mental health is not really my problem, but actually it is. If you look around you, you would see that a few children around you who are struggling from in various aspects around their mental health. So there's some children who perhaps um getting into drug, getting into the wrong crowd. Some children are feeling low, depressed, or they have a boyfriend that they don't know how to manage, they get hysteric because the boyfriend has left them. I mean, some of those happen, but um mental health is something, it's a spectrum, right? And you always, I'll say there's something like green, amber, and red. So we don't want to be red, we want to be green. But there's a spectrum. There's times when we get low, and then low can become depressed. The times when we get anxious, and anxious can become anxiety. So it's really teaching our children how to look after themselves, and it's being proactive at it, creating that sphere where you talk to your children, encourage them about school, encourage them about enabling the environment for them to be able to tell you the things that they do, such that you can guide them better. For example, you want to know their friends at school, you want to know who they hang out with. You I would So sleepovers, I'm very, very much against sleepovers, because you think that sleepovers, you expect that somebody's parents looking after your child because they're at the sleepover. No, it doesn't always happen, unless you really know the parents. So again, thinking about things like that while getting your child ready for school, like getting to know their friends, getting to know those patterns, and really helping them, nurturing them for their, to help with their mental health. Next slide, Jenny. And so, what tips do we have to support mental health? So, like I said, building a supportive environment, creating a safe space for your child to express their feelings, encouraging open communication. I don't know how many of us here had grew up in families where you could very easily tell your mom that, listen, I'm feeling low. I don't think many of us, in our generation did, but we have to be different parents, so we have to be the parents that are proactive, talking to parents. It doesn't mean that you should be friends with your children. There's a time when you should be friends with your children, when they get toward, older, like adults. But when they are young, it's really important to have that discipline, that balance, sorry, with being the person who disciplines them, but also the person that they trust and talk with, and teaching them coping skills is really important. Many children nowadays really struggle because they're unable to cope. Like some children go to school, have anxiety, or there's a school maybe is such a competitive environment. So then the children become anxious. So what I tell parents is that be grateful for your child. There is a child who maybe is in hospital and has some, maybe it's a liver failure or heart failure, or they're in hospital all the time, and your child is not that way. Your child is healthy. There's always a child who's worse than your child. There's a child who's better. I know sometimes we African parents can be hard on ourselves. So and wanting our children to be competitive, top in the class, and all of that. But one thing I always say as well is that there is no straight line. Start looking at your child's pick on your child's strengths. Some children are better at certain things than others, and ask them what they want to do. Start, especially if they're in like exam classes, start asking them now early, what do you want to do? Sometimes have a family discussion. If you're not quite sure, you can ask them to talk to other parents, other cousins who are in different spheres, and things like that. And all these things really help build a child's self-esteem. And it's really, really important. Next slide, Jenny. It's really important to help build your child's self-esteem, because when you do that, then these children will go about with their peers feeling confident, and they'll only thrive when a child is confident because the parents are helping them, build the child will only thrive. So again, sleep, sleep, sleep is really important. Now we're coming from the holidays where everything is disrupted. We children are playing, sleeping late, watching their movies. Now is the time to start getting them back into a routine. So one of the so children have different sleep patterns per age. When they are babies, they spend all their time sleeping and eating and pooing. As they get older towards teenagehood, this sleep pattern becomes more like an adult sleep pattern. So um I would say during holidays, yes, it may be tricky, but start to prepare them. So if say during school time they go to bed at 8 p.m., by now, you don't want them to go to bed beyond 9, 10. And I kid you not, there are times when I see children who are struggling with school, and when you ask about sleep pattern, it's completely chaotic. And I'm like, there's no way that this child would be able to focus in school because they go to bed at 2 a.m. They have a TV in their room. Please, no child should have a TV in their room. In fact, even adults, a room is a sterile place to sleep. And like I said, children, we are role models to our children. They look at us, see what we do, and do the same. Nobody needs a TV in their room. The worst is worse still a child. So no TV in your room, no video game, no screen time. Take this away towards bedtime. Start practicing now. My advice is start practicing now. But when school starts, you really, really need to establish a routine for your children. Sometimes I see in the UK, you would have an African party, and then you'd have Africans to attend the party. It's during school time. And on a Saturday evening, these children at 11 p.m., they are slumped down, sleeping on somebody's couch somewhere. How do we expect our children to thrive in these kind of settings? So my advice is have a fixed routine during school time. If you have to sacrifice going to a party, going to an event because your children need that sleep time, then please do. I know that in Africa sometimes we have childcare is better than here, so perhaps it's not as big an issue. But even if you're asking someone to look after your children, make sure that it's somebody trustworthy, somebody who will listen to instructions and ensure that the children do as told. But again, as the children are growing older, they need to get to a phase where they are taking responsibility for their own actions. They're able to wake up on time by themselves without much prompting, maybe have an alarm, you know, and go about their own activities. And still talking about routines. So again, I spoke about good feeding, but actually one of the things that really helps with family bonding and ensuring good nutrition is having that sit down on on a table. So one of the things that they assess in looking at in nutrition for families is how many families have a dining table, and you'll be surprised. Not, I don't think up to 50% of families in the UK have a dining table. A dining sitting together to eat is really important. If you can do it once a day in the evening with the whole family, great. If it's once or twice a week, but it's easier to have it as a pattern. Or if it's at breakfast, sitting together, you'll find that you're talking to the child about the day, you're asking them. You'll be surprised at how much things will tell you just sitting there, creating that nice family time and bonding with them, and also eating. And some of these children who are labeled fussy eaters, you'll be surprised at what family time sitting around the table does for them and eating with their parents. Next slide. So I think I've probably mentioned much about the next slide. Is literally how to sleep properly. Like I said, establishing a routine, ensuring that you have relaxing bedtime, perhaps having a bath before they go to bed. Personally, I think that children should bathe more in the evening before going to bed. If you have to bathe once a day, it should be in the evening, I think, because it helps them sleep better, wake up, have a wipe down, and then you can go to school if they have to bathe once a day. And then make sure that, like I said, it's a comfortable sleep environment. Again, a friend of mine contacted me because his children were struggling with, he said they were headstrong, they were not listening to concerns. And all I did was to go to listening to authority. And all I established was the fact that there was so much screen time, that to the extent that these children, even when they went to bed, they are with their phones, and he felt that his child was getting addicted to games. And I said to him, it's because he's spending so much time on games on social media that his brain is numbed. So even though he doesn't want to be headstrong, but his mind is just going back to the games and the phone. So now is the time to start winning all of those things. And really, during school time, children should not be exposed to these game screen times at all, or in a very limited manner, not during the week. I think during the week you should probably not have any screen time at all. Perhaps weekend you can have a bit of screen time, but again, try to have family activities outdoor and like I said, establishing that routine. Next slide, Jenny. I don't know. There are some comments. I don't know if these are. Oh, okay, that's from yourself. Okay, so again, some essential health tips for everybody. So there's no point sending your child to school and then you've done all of the other things and the child goes to class and cannot hear or cannot see or has bad teeth at some point or the tummy hurts because there's worms in the tummy, or perhaps they're low in vitamin A, so it's affecting their vision. So have these checked out. If there are concerns, ideally you should get your child's eye check. I'd say go once, and then the opticians will tell you how often you need to check depending on what they find. Hearing, I wouldn't necessarily check. Everybody in the UK gets a hearing check at birth, and then later on, if there are concerns with perhaps the child not answering to their name. So it's not something that you probably need to do routinely. But if you're worried, don't just laugh at it. Sometimes people laugh at it and say, "Oh, this child doesn't hear," or "I keep calling the child doesn't hear." Take them for a hearing check. I'm not sure who does in Cameroon. It might be an audiologist or an ENT. Check the vision, check the dental health, ensure that if you don't have money to go see a dentist, just ensure that they have good dental hygiene, brushing their teeth twice a day with a fluoride containing toothpaste and a good toothbrush, which is changed regularly. Because if you don't do that, then you're setting the child up for dental caries. And when the dental caries occur, it's much more expensive to manage. And people sometimes feel that, oh, baby teeth fall off, so I don't need to look after it too well because it's going to fall off anyway. No, and the interesting thing is that dental caries and obesity kind of go together, because if you think about it, the things that make a child obese, sweets, high calorie foods, those are the same things that will cause tooth decay. I always advise deworming your child regularly. So it's not even in the UK, you'd be surprised, if you're calling from abroad, deworm your child, because I've seen terrible worms in children in the UK. So deworm your child. Have a multivitamin. So I don't advise the gummy chewy vitamins because they get stuck in the teeth, but have a balanced vitamin that your child takes. And again, just having routine checks every now and then to ensure your child is growing well, especially if there are any concerns, perhaps annual checks at your doctor, or just weighing the child, making sure that they're growing properly as they should. Next slide, Jenny. It's That's really important. I think that's pretty much the end of my talk. I can't see any comments or questions. Yeah.
Great. That was indeed insightful. Thank you so much, Dr. Judwin. I'm sure that we are going to have to tease out some of the things that are going to really bring out the connection between the health component and the learning of our children. I think you mentioned something about sleep. I'd like you to just go over that again and tell us about how sleep impacts learning. I know that when it comes to sleep, it has an impact on the memory capacity of children. So please, can you go over that again? Tell us about sleep and how it impacts the memory capacity or the learning ability of a child, just for emphasis sake.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jen. So, sleep again, like I said, yes, I think I gave tips on how to sleep, but I kind of skimmed over the usefulness or benefits of sleep because, let's not assume that people know it. But if you think about it this way, how do you feel when you go to work and you've not had a proper night? Can you focus? Can you carry out any tasks? Personally, I can't. So think about it for your child. Sometimes you're thinking that your child is not doing well at school, but actually it's just they're just unable to focus. So what does sleep do? Your brain is like there are millions of nerves going through your brain. There's always activity going around, and um you unfortunately you get tired and you need to rest your brain. If you don't rest your brain properly for the adequate amount of time recommended, and um for like I said, I gave a chart for the various ages, but also there's something about this adults also need to rest properly. So yeah, looking at this chart, so if you don't rest the brain properly, the child cannot focus at school. The child will be tired. and it could also lead to accidents. So I can't really overemphasize the importance of sleep for your child's well-being. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So there are some children who really struggle with memory. I think I've had the case of a child who was performing really poorly at school. And just like you mentioned, sometimes when you just do the background check with the parents, you find out that the child doesn't sleep well. The parent will say, "Oh, my child will stay up no matter how much I send the child to bed. The child usually goes to bed by 11, and this child has to wake up by 5. And this is a child who is just about 5 years old, 5, 6 years old, going to bed at 11, does not take a nap during the day, and the child performs poorly." So the message here for parents is to realize that it's not always extra classes that is the solution to your child's academic struggle. Sometimes it needs for you to look at other components that are surrounding your child's learning. For example, Dr. Jibin is here to put emphasis on the health component. Sleep is very important. Sleep affects not just your child's ability to learn, but also their mood. Sometimes the behavior issues that we are dealing with as parents could be because your child is grumpy. Your child does not sleep properly, might have lots a lot more tantrums, a lot more irritability, and difficulties just being cooperative with you, the parent. And this could also pose a problem for teachers in school. Another thing I'd like us to talk about in this session before we shut down is nutrition. We can't have you here and let you go without having you drill us on nutrition. Kids are going back to school, and we have a mix of parents here who, some have the habit of sending kids to school with biscuits and juice. We have the other parents who send kids to school with fufu corn and vegetables or beans. Or so. Just walk us through how should we tackle the whole food dilemma before we come to look at the questions that we have on the chat.
Yeah, so good one. So when it comes to eating, like I said, I think that some parents overdo it. Personally, I don't believe in unprocessed foods for children, and these habits around processed foods you start to build them from a very young age. If you start to feed your child with okra and vegetables when you start to wean them with those kind of foods, and don't introduce sweet food except as a treat. They will not like them. I know I have friends who have kids. I know children who basically reject anything sweet because they've not been trained with sweet food. So I definitely am completely against super processed foods. There's now something called there's a hierarchy of food where you're talking about foods being as minimally processed as possible. But at the same time, and I don't think giving your child fufu and jama jama to school is the best idea because it's really heavy. It may make the child to sleep. So you don't want them hungry, but you also don't want them heavy and feeling sleepy at school and then they cannot focus. So like I said, if possible, sneaking, some high carb morning breakfast with some milk. I know that I say if possible because I know that sometimes some kids leave home very early because school is far off. They have to meet the bus time, so it's not very practical to always have the very rich and healthy breakfast that you want to, maybe with eggs and this and that. But what you can do is try to sneak out, something light. Um, that has some calories and also some milk. Perhaps it's a good time to get it in. But for snacks at school, I'll go with something in between, like maybe some rice, maybe some bread sandwiches. Bread is processed, but I know it's an easy option for many parents. But again, just be mindful about getting the right balance. But when they come back from school, obviously give them a good meal. But it also depends on how much time your child spends at school. If your child is spending something like from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. or 4 p.m., then they need to have a proper meal at school, at some point, but a bit late after, like early afternoon rather than in the morning. And again, ensure adequate hydration with water, not juices, not fizzy drinks, not soda drinks. Yeah, water is best for your children. I hope that answers.
Great.
Mm.
Yeah. That there's more coming, and we still have a few minutes to go before the end of the session, and we're going to milk it. All right. Okay. So there are some parents who worry a lot that their kids don't eat in the morning. So usually we have some children who are traumatized every morning before school because the parent has to force the child. Sometimes the child will eat and vomit. And I would like you to put in a word on that, because some parents, are completely, let's say a child is going to nursery school, it's going to be in school for what, 4 hours, max 5 hours. And you have a parent who habitually forces the child every morning, crying, forcing the child to eat. Meanwhile, just let us, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because it depends on what school setting is like. Does school provide food? Does school have somebody who can feed the child? It For me, it's never a good idea to force your child to eat food, because you're literally setting the child up for to have a difficult relationship with food. So um
Yeah.
it's probably better. So it depends. If you have somebody to feed the child, that if school is able to give them the snacks, put some food in their bag. If I don't know what is easily available in Cameroon. So you could have things like breakfast bars or a fruit, something that is easy to eat. So perhaps you can chuck a banana in their bag, or fruits, at some point when they feel hungry, or yogurt, at some point when they feel hungry, they can eat, or a bottle of drink, perhaps Ovaltine milk, whatever you think you want to give them. But so it's very
Mhm.
dependent. There's no straight answer, but I think forcing children to eat is often a bad idea. It's often not a good idea. You're setting that child up for,
Yeah.
yeah, failure in the long term, and a bad relationship with food. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes parents also need to just adjust their perspective, because sometimes the child might just drink a cup of milk in the morning. For some kids, no, not everybody is a morning person when it comes to food. And sometimes you have kids who are waking up very early in the morning, 6 a.m. Some people don't eat very that early. Your child may not be able to eat that early in the morning. I think
Mhm.
that just a delicious cup of milk, or a cup of, I don't know, the mounted drinks that we have, can at least put something in for this, just to help reassure the parent. I have so many parents who reach out to me about this issue. Oh, my child will eat in the morning. I have to force every morning. It stresses up the child. The child goes to school crying. So I think I just the point for this particular question is just to help reassure the parent that yes, if your child has just a few sips of their morning meal, and you pack a good lunch, a good snack for them in their bag, the child is good to go, especially
Yeah,
if the child is not going to be at school for
for
long.
very long. Yeah. Just sneaking a banana, something that's easy for the teachers to give the child at some point. Tell the teacher, or the child, they're not a breakfast person, sneaking a banana or a mango or something, and then at some point the child can have it. But there's nobody wants to eat at 6, 7, 8, even 8 a.m. So not many people want 8 a.m. at the minimum is probably the best time to start thinking of eating. So yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, there's some questions in the comment. There's a question from Ida
Yeah,
about
yeah. Let's. I wanted
okay.
us to do all the questions about nutrition before we go back to look at what's in the comment. Let's go. You can take the ones in the comment section.
Okay, so Ida's asking a question about a child that suffers from tooth decay from the age of 3 years. So unfortunately, there was probably a missed opportunity to prevent that happening. Like I said, some parents believe that, oh, it's baby teeth, so they don't necessarily brush it because they feel that the child is going to fall. But tooth decay, unfortunately, if the child has tooth decay at 3 years, you need to see a dentist, and the dentist will decide whether the tooth needs to come off. And it's not a nice procedure for a 3-year-old. So the first step, my perspective, is preventing. And there's no particular. The only recommendation for toothpaste is a fluoride-based toothpaste, and most of the toothpaste on the market and from recognized brands are fluoride-based. Yeah, it's basically our advice. I don't have a particular brand to say. As long as it's fluoride, you need fluoride is what protects the enamel for the child. But if they have to decay, they should see a dentist. And it's really important to see a dentist, because if the infection, it can cause an infection and then it can spread. And it's really painful. Trust me, toothache is really sore. Um, and Ida's other question is about refractive error. So it depends on the cause of refractive error. So somebody like me, I wear glasses. I was born with it. I mean, my dad has it. My sister has refractive errors. It runs in the family. The only cure is probably to do laser surgery for your eyes, which I don't know if it's done in Cameroon. It might be. I think it's done in Cameroon, but it's laser surgery. There's nothing you can do. Again, speak to an eye doctor, which I'm not an eye doctor. That's out of my scope of practice. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I think that about rounds up the questions that we have in the comment section. I'm going to check the communities to see if those who are having any difficulties being here live, some usually drop questions on the different platforms so that we answer them during the session. Uh, Great. Now, I was going to ask you to talk about uh, sleep apnea, tonsillitis, and all those related issues. Now, there are some children who have issues that might easily go unnoticed. For example, the kids who have the hypertrophied tonsils that might not have a good quality of sleep at night, and that could affect, it will affect the child's learning because when the quality of sleep is not good, of course, the child's ability to be apt in class might not really be at its best. What would you advise parents who might have a child that snores a lot or is very noisy during their sleep, wakes up tired, wakes up grumpy, teacher complains the child is sleeping in school? How would you advise the parent to proceed with in that kind of situation?
Yeah, so that's a very, it's, even though it sounds like it's just sleep apnea, but actually it can be a very significant problem in some children. If a child has sleep apnea, so there are two situations in which a child may snore. Usually when children have a viral illness, or their tonsils are big because of an infection, they tend to snore, but as long as it settles, and then they get back to normal, it's fine. But there are children who snore to the extent that they hold their breathing during sleep. Yes, those children struggle with sleep, and they need an assessment from an ENT doctor. If you go to see an ENT doctor, they'll do something called a sleep study. They assess how the child is sleeping, how much oxygen the child is getting during sleep, and then they'll decide if it's too bad. Then they'll say, okay, we think this child needs maybe removal of the tonsils, which is called a tonsillectomy. Yeah. So I'll say if you're worried that your child is not is snoring. Snoring is not on its own. Snoring is probably not the big problem. But if they're holding their breath in snoring, then they're probably having difficulty breathing and a bad time with sleep. So yes, get them assessed.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Doc. I think we don't have any other questions. Thank you so much for accepting this invitation. We
Yeah.
have one question. How often should you deworm children?
I
How
think something
often
like,
should you deworm?
yeah, something like every 6 months is reasonable, I would say, depending on where you live.
Okay.
Mm. And they usually recommend repeating the worm medicine every after 2 weeks. So when you first deworm them, they usually say repeat the medicine in 2 weeks to make sure that you've killed all the babies as well. Yeah, but I'd say 6 months sounds about right. Yeah, it's what we
Okay.
recommend. Mm.
All
There's no
right.
reason
So I think
not
we're gonna take.
everybody should deworm their child, because even if you're clean at home, at school they go and share the same bathroom, share soap. If one child has worms at school, they'll catch the worms. So deworm your children.
Yeah. So we're gonna take the last question: How to manage children 6 and 8 years who do not want these snacks for school but money to buy what they want in school canteen?
So
I think
you're
that's
the
a
parent.
parenting related.
Yeah, that's the parenting thing. The parent, you have to tell them what to do. So unfortunately, I think an 6 to 8 year old child does not have any authority, in my opinion, to dictate what they want to have at school. They should be grateful that they are having food to take to school and take whatever their parent offers them. Basically, don't give them a choice if they
Well,
don't.
a great tip for parents in this kind of situation should also be the fact that you should. One of the things that I advise parents to do is to allow a day or two in the course of the week where the children also get to choose what they want to take to school. That can help. Usually, they want to buy things from the canteen because they want to buy, the sweets. They'll just keep buying things that are not healthy. So, if you want your child to be nourished and at the same time you want to also encourage cooperation with the children, don't just override everything. There are some parents who would like to take the one egg every day of the week. The child gets to have no say. One of the ways that you can actually help encourage cooperation is to have your children have a day when they can get to pick what they want to take to school, regardless of what it is. At least you can give up one day or two, right? And the rest of the days you get to choose what it is that they take to school. Because 6 to 8, using money to school, you don't know what your child is buying. You don't know if it's healthy. You don't know if the child is even buying the food or using the money to do other things that you might not approve of. So I've seen some cases that really turned out really bad for kids who were, allowed to use money in school, and it was a sad story. But 6 to 8, if you've not really had time to train your child on how to use money, it's not advisable to have your child using money to buy snacks at school, because again, you can't vet for what they are buying at school, whether it's healthy or not. And being kids, they will obviously just buy the sweet stuff or the stuff that is not nutritious enough to support their learning and their growth. All right. Unfortunately, time has run out. We have. Can you recommend a multivitamin for kids between 5 and 11?
Yeah, I saw that question, but it depends on where you are. Like, but basically, just look at the packaging, and I can't recommend a particular brand to you. And if you were here, and it depends on where you are. If you're in the UK, I would say get something that has vitamin D mandatorily. If you're in Cameroon, just get something that has vitamin A, B. So vitamin A is really important for children, not in excessive doses, but vitamin A, D, E, but also B vitamins and B vitamins really help with the brain. So it's more about the content of the multivitamin, and again things like zinc, manganese. So usually most vitamins will have about the same contents for children. So just get one that's age appropriate, but that contains vitamins A, B, C, D, but also micronutrients like manganese, selenium. Those are really helpful for the brain.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why this question is so important is because so many parents, when they go to the pharmacy to get multivitamins, they give them appetite stimulants, that have just a little bit of, because here what is commonly called multivitamin is the appetite stimulants. That's what. So I think that is very important that we also talk about this issue of the constant use of appetite stimulants that many parents have the habit of doing in the name of, giving kids multivitamins.
Yeah, most parents worry more than they should. There's very rarely a child that has come to me, even at work, to say that, oh, my child is not eating. They are growing. Usually they're growing well. So where are they getting the food from? So they are eating enough, maybe enough to satisfy your your wishes, but they are eating enough that they are growing as they should grow.
Yeah.
And that's why I said sometimes it's good to have a nice multivitamin, not an appetite stimulant. A child, you don't want your child to be obese, you just want it to grow properly. If they're growing properly, then it's fine. So appetite stimulants, no. If you have to give a child appetite stimulant to eat, then are they sick? Are they unwell? A healthy child, normal child should not be needing appetite stimulants.
All right. Okay, Doc. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We have come to the end of this session. Dr. Judwin, as usual, it has been a great pleasure to have you on board. I look forward. Hopefully,
Me
you're not
too.
going to come around just when it's back to school. We're going to try to have another session with you here to talk about other health-related stuff. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you again whenever our invitation comes or whenever you can make time to come and educate us on
So,
health-related stuff when it
so
comes to our children.
okay. Thank you very much, everybody. I was glad to have been your guest.
All right. Okay,
Bye.
dear parents. See you on the next one. Bye.